Jewels of the Alps. The 5 largest lakes of Upper Italy. Born of glaciers, shaped by water, tamed by the human hand. They tell stories of nature and culture. In the rhythm of the seasons, they all show a changing face. Each in its own way. Lake Como, Italy's 3rd largest alpine lake. Just an hour-and-a-half drive from Italy's northern powerhouse, Milan, it lies nestled at the southern edge of the Alps. Lake Como is easy to identify. With its 3 arms, it looks like an inverted Y. The ancient Romans seized on the strategic advantages of this site between the Alps and the Po River Valley. Lake Como was an ideal staging ground for both trade and military conquests. They gave it the Latin name Lacus Larius, and the locals still call their lake Lario. After the Roman era, it became the seat of Italian aristocracy and has been a place of inspiration for many artists. This enticing blend of rich history and culture still retains its strong allure. The Lago di Como is also known as an exclusive spot for the glamorous set, enjoying the epitome of la dolce vita. But there's a lot more to the lago than just the clichés. There are days when Lake Como shows its wild side. Early April. Instead of springtime Italian good life, the lakeshore was being battered by a storm. The difference between air pressure levels down at the lake and up in the surrounding mountains gives rise to thermal winds, including the notorious Breva wind, which can suddenly unleash a mighty force. Just north of Lake Como lies the Pian di Spagna, a plain where land and water have always battled for supremacy. Among its largest residents is a herd of close to 80 does. Lured by the lush green, they have left the cover of the forests. At just 16 square kilometers, the plain is relatively small, yet contains a wide variety of natural habitats, including bogs, woods, and waters. A third of it is a designated nature reserve. This wetlands area at the edge of the Alps is a key rest stop for migrating birds, but many aquatic birds also live here year-round. The wetlands waters are also home to various species of fish. A sign of good water quality is the presence of the kingfisher. Though hardly bigger than a sparrow, its bright plumage makes the kingfisher one of the most eye-catching inhabitants in the neighborhood. It hunts with a precision technique, plunge diving. This method brings in a catch of up to 20 little fish a day. At this point, it still had to fend only for itself, but that would soon change. This natural habitat is not only home to over 200 bird species, various reptiles and amphibians reside here as well. Impressive biodiversity at close quarters. No wonder the Pian di Spagna is known as the region's nature paradise. At its southern end, the wetlands merge with Lake Como. Here, the historic estates, some worth multi-millions, are the defining feature of the landscape. At peak season, thousands of tourists flock here like so many migrating birds. The main springtime attraction, the numerous grand villas and their ornate, well-tended gardens. Some of the magnificent mansions open their doors to visitors. One such is the Villa Carlotta in Tremezzo, right on the southwestern lakeshore. Famous for its botanical garden, busloads of plant lovers stream through the gates here daily. The entrance to the villa is designed in Italian Baroque garden style. Nothing has changed here for 200 years. Nature perfected by design. The scene behind the villa reveals that this garden is not just about artful aesthetics. Here, nature is allowed free expression in all its shapes and colors. Mara Sugni heads the Botanical Gardens Educational Services Department.
I love it all, being surrounded every day by all of these marvelous plants, which all have so many stories to tell.
The Villa Carlotta was built in 1690. About 200 years later, it became the property of Duke Georg II of Saxe-Meiningen, a man with two great passions, nature and theater. He commissioned the building of a park designed to combine the two. Various stages throughout the grounds showcase different landscapes from throughout the world. From rock gardens to rainforests. Lake Como, measuring almost 150 square meters, stores warmth year-round, resulting in a mild local climate, allowing exotic species from throughout the world to thrive. From Asia to South America to Australia, the Duke spared no effort to bring a vast variety of plant life to Tremezzo, not just for his own pleasure, but for the benefit of others as well.
I don't know if the Duke actually had the intention of educating, but that's what he did. Because at that time, of course, there was no Google, no internet, no television. So a visit to the gardens was always an educational activity.
With her department, Mara keeps the Duke's legacy alive, introducing mainly school groups to the treasures of the gardens. Such as this forest, normally found in the Himalayas at an altitude of 5,000 meters, a rhododendron forest. The trees tower to heights of up to 30 meters. Some of them are several hundred years old.
These are the young shoots from which the tree produces new leaves. Although the tree is so old, it still has a strong will to live, still brings forth a lot of energy.
These olive trees are also steeped in history. The variety goes back to the ancient Roman era. The olive trees stand at the far end of the garden, which often escapes the notice of the hordes of visitors. In former times, farmers lived here on the estate, producing food for themselves and the owners. Many of the grand lakeside villas had small agricultural areas for their own use. Nowadays, Mara and her colleagues plant the vegetable beds.
The vegetables we grow here are not typically what you find in the supermarket. We plant regional heirloom varieties no longer in common use. These rare types are an example of agri-food biodiversity well worth preserving.
Education as a bridge from the past to the future. That would surely have pleased the Duke. The steep southern banks of Lake Como have never been suitable for serious agricultural enterprise. The northern side, however, offers stunning natural landscapes and precious farmland. Over the course of centuries, mountain rivers deposited masses of sand and coarse gravel, bit by bit creating the plain Pian di Spagna. 70% of the area is still used mainly for dairy farming. The rest is a nature reserve. Some wild animals also profit from their grazing neighbors when it comes to nutrition. This kite is a good example. The pastures are prime hunting grounds, especially after the first mowing in April. The new-mown grass offers no protective cover for insects and rodents. Springtime is, of course, mating season, for pheasants as well. They originally came to Central Europe with Roman legions returning from an Asian conquest. A male onlooker observes the mating couple. The roosters live with their harem of several hens, each and every one jealously guarded. The rival is told in no uncertain terms who cock of the roost is here. And he who won't listen to the message you'll have to feel it. Meanwhile, the kingfishers in the Pian di Spagna were already caring for their young in their breeding burrow hidden in the stump of a tree. Shortly after the chicks hatch, the parents already start feeding them little fish. To ward off the threat of hypothermia, the mother hen gathers the nestlings under her warm, protective wings. The Lago di Como is subject to the influence of the Alps in terms of climate, but also in relation to landscape and geology. Just 20 kilometers north of the lake, the Chiavenna Valley joins the foothills of the Southern Alps. All the lakes of Upper Italy, including Lake Como, are former glacial lakes born in the last ice age, resulting from the interplay of time, water, and other primal forces of nature. The power of water is on stunning display in the Acquafragia Falls in the Chiavenna Valley. Their waters spill into one of the numerous streams flowing into and out of Lake Como. Thanks to the many waterways, the city of Como became a trade hub early on. Its imposing cathedral bears testimony to the wealth that reigned here starting in the 15th century. Just a few kilometers to the east, in the hamlet of Garlate, lies the source of this prosperity. The life of the locals was transformed when trade in a certain commodity began. And this tree played a major part. The white mulberry tree, originally native to Asia. Thousands of them were planted at Lake Como, because its leaves are the sole food source for these tiny animals. Bombyx mori, better known as silkworms. And they are real little gluttons. Within about a month, they gain 10,000 times their original weight. A little silkworm eats an average of 2 to 4.5 kilos of mulberry leaves in its lifetime. During this time, it sheds its skin several times. And then, within 2 to 3 days, it spins its cocoon out of a thread almost 3 kilometers long. In commercial silk production, only a select few are allowed to hatch as moths. To harvest the precious silk threads, the cocoons are put in boiling water. So this transition is a rare sight to behold. Silkworms are now purely mini livestock, and after centuries of breeding, the hatched moths would be unable to survive in the wilderness. The Silk Museum in Garlate presents the history of this ancient traditional craft. thousands of families earn their livelihood from silkworm breeding, the processing of the silk, or as silk merchants. Silk remains one of the most precious natural fabrics. To make just one dress, about 1,200 cocoons are needed. The museum shows how machinery from different eras was used to harvest and process silk, bearing witness to an industrial evolution. In the 19th century, competition from Asia made local silkworm breeding unsustainable. Only the processing and finishing were still done here. But even today, Como silk remains a special mark of quality. Lake Como was already a trading hub in the Middle Ages. Here, the ruins of the Castello di Vezio, an 11th century castle erected to protect the vital trade routes. It is perched at the spot where the three arms of the lake branch off. This central point of the lake is thus also known as the Golden Triangle. The ruins are now home to very special residents. Falconer Nicola Castellano has lived his whole life on Lake Como.
For 36 years, I've awakened each morning to see the lake. That never ceases to move me. The lake has so many faces and stirs different emotions within me, depending on the weather and the temperature.
The Castello di Vezio was a military outpost up until World War I. Now it's mainly a sightseeing destination. Nicola handles the admin, but his heart belongs to falconry and his birds of prey.
Obviously, they have to get to know me before I can let them fly free. They have to be able to recognize me. And above all, they have to learn to trust me. That's the most important part of my work with raptors. But that trusting relationship can only be established with lots and lots of patience and lots of time.
For Nicola, that hard-won trust, without force or submission, is the basis of the collaboration between man and bird. The art of falconry is more than 3,500 years old and is on the UNESCO Intangible Heritage List. Animal protection laws now permit only certain raptor species to be kept in captivity. Those resident at Castello di Vezio include Harris hawks Linda and Parsifal, and barn owl Semiola. School groups are the main audiences for Nicola's air shows. He uses the show to give the children as much insight as he can into the lives of his raptors.
My goal is to send them home with some real added value. Not just knowledge, but in terms of emotional experience. Mainly, I try to infuse them with a little more respect for nature.
Depending on the weather, he lets his birds fly free once or twice a day, always trusting them to return. Lake Como is also home to wild raptors. Buzzards, kites, and falcons, everywhere they circle overhead. A kestrel poised in midair between uplift and gravity. In hovering mode, it stalks its prey. Kestrels prefer high-lying spots as breeding sites, such as here in this old farmhouse. Nestled in cracks in the wall, the young appear to be waiting. Time to go in search of sustenance. Kestrel couples often stay together for years, and both parents care for the young together. The male had already been out hunting, cutting the flight of a smaller bird short. The division of labor is clear. One hunts, the other delivers the goods to the young. Before the mother bird served the fresh meal, she removed the heaviest feathers, which are hard to digest. In the meantime, the male had already hunted down the next course. Insects, rodents, and small birds are all on the kestrel menu. But the female wasn't yet ready for the next morsel. She still had to bring the bigger catch back to the nest. In the western arm of Lake Como lies its only island, the Isola Comacina. Though just 500 meters long and 120 meters wide, the island is rich in historical treasures. Here, archaeologists have unearthed relics from many epochs. The ruins of the Basilica di Sant'Eufemia, a 7th century bishop's see. The island is steeped in myth and legend. It's even said that the Holy Grail was stashed away here for a time. After a devastating war in the 12th century, Emperor Frederick Barbarossa prohibited the settlement of the island, and it did in fact remain uninhabited until the mid-20th century. But the ruins have always been a welcoming home to wall lizards. Deft climbers with long, nimble toes, the little reptiles can even scale vertical surfaces. And when they need a snack, they just go next door. Though no one currently resides on the Isola Comacina, this man is there every day. For 40 years, Benvenuto Puricelli has run the island's only restaurant.
My predecessor started here in 1947, not long after the war. Here on the island there are good days and bad days, with many or few diners. So he started doing simple, fresh dishes with local ingredients: vegetables, trout, and chicken. That became the house menu and people liked it, so he stuck with it.
So in its 60 years, the restaurant has never had a conventional menu. On offer is always a single 5-course meal. Simple, traditional fare, seasoned only with olive oil, lemon, salt, and pepper. Vegan? Food allergies? With 5 wholesome courses, there's something for everyone. The cook makes no exceptions, however famous the diner might be.
Bruce Springsteen, as you can see. He was young then, so was I. I remember them all. In this one here, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Jennifer Aniston. I remember them as if it were yesterday.
Since actor George Clooney famously bought a villa on Lake Como, not only the real estate prices have exploded.
Lake Como has always been famous. Americans have always come here. People from all over the world have always liked to come here. But when he arrived, it really raised the profile. And now many more people and celebrities from all over come to Lake Como.
But for Benvenuto, one thing is clear.
They actually come to see Benvenuto. He's the most famous of all.
These diners couldn't care less about celebrity status. The lizards come here to enjoy a little portion of fish, or even a dish of ice cream. The restaurant is known far beyond the shores of Lake Como, not just for its glamorous patronage. Benvenuto also keeps old traditions alive. Because the Isola Comacina still lies under an old curse pronounced by a bishop in the name of Emperor Barbarossa. The island should remain uninhabited. Anyone who attempted to live there would suffer an agonizing death. And people heeded the warning for almost 700 years. But then in 1947, 3 men dared to defy the curse and open a restaurant. This restaurant. Every day, Benvenuto tells their story. After 2 of the men then died under mysterious circumstances, the sole survivor was advised to enact an old fire rite to break the curse. The ingredients: brandy, coffee, and fire. Benvenuto has also kept this tradition alive. And in fact, no one has come to grief since. And diners love this unusually chilling digestif. Night reveals things unseen by the light of day. These men had awaited the cover of darkness. The clear full moon night would be ideal for their purposes. But on this night, they were in for a completely unexpected surprise.
My name is Emilio Mancuso. I'm a marine biologist at the University of Milan and its sister organization Verda Acqua. Our studies aim to improve conditions both in the oceans and in the freshwater environments typical of our region.
For this dive, Emilio and his colleagues had selected a spot on the northeastern side of the lake. Lake Como is of special interest to the researchers because with a depth of 425 meters, it is the deepest lake in Upper Italy. Underwater photographer Pietro Formis was on hand to document the expedition. Emilio finds these night dives especially fascinating.
Diving at night has its own mysterious charm. You only see what is captured in the beam of light, surrounded by shadowy darkness. That helps me focus my complete attention on what's right in front of us.
The underwater world of the lake is just as subject to the cycle of the seasons as the natural world above. In the winter, the water is crystal clear, But the energy of the bright spring sun brings an explosion of algae and plankton growth. The result? Poor visibility. Nighttime is better for exploration, and more lake dwellers appear at night. One focal point of the biologists' study is the water quality. It has improved considerably over the last 10 years due to purification plants and dewatering systems. Lake Como is known for its plentiful fish stocks, but the divers had their sights set on other subaqueous creatures, such as these Galician crayfish, an invasive species that has supplanted native species almost completely in recent years, a serious problem in many European waters, hence another important research subject for Emilio. During the 1-hour dive, weather conditions took a sudden turn. The serene full moon night was well and truly over. High time to get out of the water.
We didn't notice anything during the dive. Only with our heads above water did we discover it was raining.
Such capricious weather is not uncommon in the region. The day's warm air masses had collided with the cold air coming down from the southern Alps, putting a stormy stop to the underwater expedition. The next morning, the snow-capped mountains bore silent witness to the night's downpour, as did the moisture-drenched ground below. The lush green was inviting. The deer herd from the Pian di Spagna Nature Reserve was also tempted to break cover. It is a doe herd consisting of only females and their young. The males only join them for mating season in the fall. The kingfishers were still busy raising their young. Both parents still tirelessly hunting down prey. Because as the chicks grow, so does their appetite. In the meantime, they were showing their first feather quills and would soon open their eyes. With its Y shape, the Lago di Como has the longest shoreline of all the lakes of Upper Italy. The western arm of the lake is home to the most exclusive estates and hotels. Tucked away behind tennis courts and between grand villas lies a little gem of nature. The enchanting Giardino della Valle in Cernobbio, just a few kilometers from the city of Como. A garden with an unusual genesis. It all began over 40 years ago here on this bridge, where Ida Lonati Frati, known as Nonna Pupa, had a brainwave.
I was walking my little niece to school, and she said to me, right here at this spot, "Nonna, how nice it would be to make a secret garden." We could hear the sound of rushing water down there, but we couldn't see the creek, which was overgrown, mainly with brambles. Hidden under the brambles was so much garbage you can't imagine. It was a real rubbish dump. Make a garden there? It sounded like a crazy idea.
Photos document that the area under the bridge had indeed been used for years as a dump for all sorts of refuse. Nonna Pupa and her niece began to clear the rubbish with their own hands. Help from the town council was not forthcoming. Nowadays, barely a trace of the old rubbish dump remains. Over the years, Nonna Pupa had in fact managed to create a secret garden, an oasis in the middle of town, not far from the lakeshore. Contrary to the professional botanical gardens of the grand villas, here 95-year-old Nonna Pupa and a team of volunteers run the show.
Hey, ciao Bianca. Come stai? Bene, ciao cara.
A few years ago, an association was founded to support the effort. Little Bianca often lends a hand. The idea is that the Giardino della Valle should be a meeting place for people, but also where nature and culture meet. Admission is free, and the summer months bring a calendar of readings, concerts, and exhibitions. Nonna Pupa bought the first plants with her own money. Later, she began to receive plant donations. That gave rise to a botanical hodgepodge, which, thanks to the mild climate, has thrived. Nonna Pupa has a personal relationship with each and every plant.
I like the garden very much. I love it. I feel like I'm a part of it, as if I were a tree or a bush. My arms are like the branches of a tree and my hands are like the leaves. I really feel I'm one of them.
Questo è il mio pensiero.
Nonna Pupa and her secret garden, almost an urban fairy tale. In springtime, aerial acrobats glide above the surface of the water, swallows hunting down insects. After wintering in Africa, they return to the lakes of Upper Italy to brood. On the shores of the Lario, they gather moist loam for nest building. The special construction method makes the swallows very unpopular neighbors. They use bodily secretions to hold the loam and other nesting materials together, and some of the goo invariably goes astray. In the spring, their life is still relatively carefree. But come fall, things get dangerous, because that's when hunting season in northern Italy begins, and even swallows are fair game. The crag martin is a type of swallow that nests far from human activity in rock faces and caves. Disused tunnels are also a popular choice, like this one just southwest of Lake Como. It was now May, peak season for swallow parents. This ambitious colony had built a whole series of nests in the tunnel. The chicks were impatiently demanding food. The disused tunnel on the eastern arm of the lake used to provide a link to Lago di Como's second city, Lecco. Here, things are more placid than on the glamorous western arm of Lake Como. Below the Swallows Tunnel, we again met up with marine biologist Emilio Mancuso. He was preparing for another dive.
We're here at a spot that's very popular with divers. Its name gives a clue to what is found here in the depths of the lake.
Le macchine, cars. This tunnel, now the breeding site for crag martins, was once the scene of illegal intrigues. From the mid-20th century on, insiders knew it as a place to dispose of an old car. A little push over the cliff edge was all it took. Thus, the bed of Lake Como became home to an unusual underwater cemetery. Some of the cars were ditched here because they were ripe for the junkyard, others to dispose of criminal evidence. Just as rubbish attracts more rubbish, the first dumped cars were soon joined by other unwanted vehicles. But when the tunnel was decommissioned, the illegal disposal stopped. In the meantime, divers have discovered the odd underwater collection and added their own accessories to the ensemble. The fish have also made themselves at home in the unsolicited furnishings. The crevices offer protection, and new types of edible algae grow on the metal. Nevertheless, here as everywhere, recklessly discarded rubbish is a burden on the natural environment. That applies to one form of trash in particular.
One of the worst problems confronting the lake, thanks to everyone, is plastic trash. People must be made aware that they are not to leave anything on the shores of the lake, should leave no trace behind, such as bags or bottles. They must understand that if this trash lands in the lake, it will remain there for years, sometimes centuries. This has a very negative effect on the sensitive dynamics of the ecosystem.
Emilio's organization, Verde Aqua, works closely together with local authorities. Their goal, to protect the lakes and maintain a balanced relationship between human culture and the natural environment. Back to the nature reserve Pian di Spagna, just north of Lake Como. A few weeks had passed. The kingfisher young were now already dressed in flashy feathering. And they could now gulp down whole fish like the grown-ups. In just a few days, they would already be hunting for their own food. It was late May. Summer was already in the air. Here on Lake Como, too, a glittering jewel of the Alps, full of fascinating real-life stories.